I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, muchas gracias to everyone for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, as the love and support everyone shares and sends my way. From the heart, gracias. Also, do please like, share, subscribe, and hype to this video. As do please stop by and check out the message on paper on the recent book that just got put out and help it reach out there in a different form now. Gracias. Well, everyone, on this one, I want to answer a question I've been asked a few times, right? Which is throughout my walk. When was the last time I personally experienced a big power struggle amongst carnales and that it reflected on the yards and on the streets, you know? And for this one, I'm gonna take you back to 1999, right? Right when I pulled up to Ironwood. As I mentioned before, Ironwood had his llavero, but he wasn't doing what he was supposed to in every sense of the word. You know, unfortunately, in them times when the shoes were active, there was a lot of camaradas that didn't earn that spot, that responsibility. Sometimes you would just end up going to a shoe and just be placed near a Billy, and just so that Billy could keep his reach going on the lineas and seeing that you're able to make sense of what's one plus one, he would send you out apalabrado, right? With underneath him. And that's unfortunately what happened in Ironwood. When I got there and the vato that had it, he wasn't checking paperwork correctly. He was allowing homies to get smashed by different sets, and he wasn't retaliating due to he was more worried about the dope coming in the weekend. And it's basically through Raul and stuff how I got given the responsibility to take a yard, right? To control the jardín and a yard. And the first mission, of course, was recall everybody. What I mean by that is no buts or ifs. Every boquero is gonna recheck your paperwork, and not just your 128G. You're gonna present your court transcripts, and we're gonna clear the yard, right, of any basura that might be walking amongst us. And to not retouch on what I have already, you know, I dare to say like half the yard locked it up. Individuals that were been on that yard for many years, they end up rolling it up because they had something hidden in their closet, you know. But anyways, getting to the topic, one thing settled down, you know, from that yard is when I started crossing words with Weddle Shirt, and it happened through a homie, V, from Shelltown. The camarada, he was on the yard, and he was, I dare say, a personal friend of Sherm. They corresponded with one another on a whole different level than Sherm did with others. You know, I'm telling you, because you build friendships, trust, and he would show me, some of the appeals that they would correspond. And of course, my dealings with him was just to to allow them to make money for him, right, on the yard. And I took the proper steps and I asked Terco, we were already working it with other camaradas, different pilis on the yard where he would get his respects and they would do their thing. When this happened, though, I got advised, by Terco that if I did this, I was going to be taking on the responsibility of what's coming next. So, even though I got schooled by a member, even my celly, everything, to be sincere, I didn't really have too much experience, right? Because before this, I was going from prison to prison up north, and we didn't have a chance to get deep into it besides paying our respects, right? And it's due to it was on basically in Northern California in the pens at that time, right? 97 through 90, 99. Everywhere we landed, it was on site, you know. When norteños didn't want us on the yard, and we either had to stay on the yard for 72 hours or whatever, right? The case might have been. The point is, I wasn't really aware of a lot of the things happening, through the system, and so I requested to basically clearness, to put me up on game on what he meant, and he told me there was an open war with Weather Sherm, you know, and it had to do with the two chinos, Chino from the FA, Chino from Garrity, and Chispas from 18, as choppers, but choppers was not out there like that, and basically they were going at each other soldados for a misunderstanding they had. I believe in Donovan, but don't quote me on it. And I asked, what should I do then? They said, nah, just go ahead. You can't deny the term that right when you already have individuals doing it like that, right? It's gonna get back to him, and he's gonna circle back against you, and you don't want that. Nobody wanted that from Sherm at that moment, right? And anyways, at the end of the day, the the problem maintained. I guess other Phillies just decided to sit back from it, and the ones that were stuck in it at the end of the day was Sherm and Chino from Garrity. They were stabbing each other soldados. As far as I know, it was happening in Soledad, in Tehachapi. It was happening up there, up north, more in high desert. Different prisons. But when I experienced it was when the homie from Garrity hit the yard, right? Fresh out the shoe, and he hit the yard. And when he hit the yard, he introduced himself properly, you know, and he said he was working for Chino from Garrity, and I just said mucho gusto, Chino. His name was Huesos, and that was that, right? But within time, more and more homies under Chino hit the yard. And let me just say that in Ironwood, the SD car was deep, deep, deep. And the last thing you wanted was for it to get out of your hands, right? Camaradas on camaradas, which you didn't have no say so though. But to keep it a book, a lot of people don't know that Terco. he was more on Chino's side, because he didn't agree a lot on what a lot of Phillies didn't agree with Sherm. The way he addressed his wheelers, he put it out there. He was blunt on being direct. And for those that help corresponds with Güero, the last thing you wanted was a kite from Güero with that famous word he always said next to a name, right? Which was chiple or Xipe, which meant pegada, pegar, or however you want to phrase it. And if he send you namapil with somebody's name and chipe next to it, it means that dude had to bounce. The problem is that since he was so open in his conversations, the squad knew this too, you know. And anyways, the first strike came from Wessels. You know, Wessels ended up stabbing the homie from Shelltown and removing him with no permission, not requesting Terco's approval or well, I was nobody, right? But you guys get it. And so I addressed it, right? And said, what should I do? And that's when I noticed where Terco was at. Because he said, just leave it alone. Don't get in between their power struggle. And after that, it was a back and forth. You know, that was the only incident where they didn't address the casa, which is Terco. After that, it was like, hey, we have this individual that's been buying for us for, I don't know, for a little bit. And these guys are hitting him up and basically telling me how much is he giving you the cuartito, which at the moment it was, I believe, 150 bucks or 100 bucks, somewhere there. No, 100 bucks. And I guess Chino's crew was telling them, oh, we got good jale for 80. Come and taste it. They were basically stepping on toes, right? Even though they weren't making feria like that. For example, the next move came from the homies from San Diego, which was, hey, the papers, we're giving them for 40 bucks now. And a cuartito, we're giving out more than four papers, and it was just little things like that, just back and forth, poking at each other. And, one basically being advised by the person holding the jardín to stand back, allow them to do their thing. And then one day it just went off. Ramflas went at it. At the time, Chino had, I would say, four good soldados underneath him on the yard, right? Not from his neighborhood, but from East LA, definitely, from Little Valley. Well, four good soldados from East LA. I don't want to bring the names because of their outcome, right? And what a Sherm, like I said, San Diego was deep. And they were all one way or another answering to Sherm. Because Sherm was the person to go when it came to San Diego, right? And but the vatos from Chino's side, East LA Ranfla was still had individuals on the yard, right? Which either they were homies from the neighborhood or whatever, so they got involved. And it became a little riot. Not everyone got involved, but it was just them poking at each other back and forth, until they went at it. And we're not talking about coscorrones, right? Just knuckling up and going at it. Nah, they went at it with fierros, and they they wanted to basically clean house of the next camaradas, and to me it was a sad situation, you know, to see sureños going at it with sureños over pleasing a man, you know, that just felt more superior than the next man, even though they're hermanos. Well, to not make a long story short, you know, the vatos that would go at it with fierros on the yard, they would end up hitting the hole. As they're in the hole is when Chino locked it up. You know, he went sideways and he rolled it up. And he basically left all his workers to defend themselves. And of course, Güero took advantage of that. You know, every single worker or that got involved in that situation that were representing Chino got hit in the hole. And when Chino locked it up, Terco did have no option but to support Güero Sherm and not allow any one of them to push past Ironwood. There was no way of them clearing their stuff to come back when, you know, it was allowed by T at one point for them to handle their business accordingly. And, you know, I gotta be thankful he told me to step back and allow them to do their thing, but it didn't sit well with me. You know, I even asked Raul from Riverside, and he told me the same thing. Hey, you don't want to get in between because Sherm, everything came back on Sherm. Sherm's going to hold grudges, and you don't want that. So it just circle around to what I always say, you know, you could be a sureño doing everything right for like many tend to do it right, represent one individual, one pili, and call him your tío, you're his sobrino, his worker, because you're 100% solid with that individual, no one else. But what happens when that individual decides to take a dive? In this case, you know, I personally was an area where the hole was in 5 block. So I had to send the names of the people involved on the Chino side for all of them to get hit and removed. Not to mention the 180 into Tehachapi, it all belonged to Chino. And way before I got there, every camarada on there got hit or removed. Because their big homie decided to go sideways. And that's what ends up happening. You know, I know a lot of people preach and say, hey, it don't happen to every camarada. I agree with that. There is some that really hold a lot of value in the sense of what they can bring to the table, that another Pili would end up pulling them and protecting them. But not every Pili is going to agree with it. You see some Pilis, even though you're being protected, they still have that grudge against you. So when you land where they're at, they're going to hit you. They're going to remove you under false pretense, whatever. But anyways, after this cleanup, there was numerous of incidents, you know. I mentioned it before, like Gai with the 805, Orange County with the 805, Southside with Orange County. It was a Ramfla trip. you know. But this one right here was caused by Beelies. They were bumping heads in the bay, and it was reflecting on the yard. Again, don't quote me, I don't know the beginnings of it. I just know when it reached Ironwood and I was there to see it flourish. And it went from allow them to do their thing, pay their respects, to them poking at each other and let them do their thing, stay out the way. As long as they keep paying their respects, as long as they were breaking bread with Terco, he didn't care. But when push came to shove, one side would end up getting removed for being loyal. But anyways, that's my first experience when I seen a big power struggle, and it was big. At least what I seen in Ironwood was nothing compared to what was heard that was happening throughout the system. I'm on Sherm and Chino from Garrity, and I guess Chino, amongst other things, he just felt that rope around his neck and he just said, "I'm gone," and left all these soldados to defend themselves against someone like Sherm. I really think that's why Chino from the FA, Chispas, and then pulled out and allowed them to continue with their politics against each other. But anyways, everyone, hope I made sense. I'm recording this as fast as possible to leave it to be uploaded for when I have chemo. There'll be something to be put out. Hope everybody maintains well, full of health, as family. Please stay true to yourself and loyal to loved ones.